Scotland's rainforest is one of its treasures. In this video, we hear from some people who know these West Coast Atlantic woods well. Tree planters, Gaelic stewards, forest rangers, guerrilla hunters, and people who've started and tended to community woodlands across the Argyll and Bute area. These interviews were conducted as research for a storytelling show called Scotland's Rainforest that will be presented by Story Wagon in summer and autumn 2025. We hope to see you down the road.
The forest's vast and we're small. We're not the controlling force in here. Nature's a controlling force.
Where did all the native ricks? So one story I've heard is charcoal ships used to go up and down.
Yeah, that's correct.
Strip the wood, turn it into charcoal.
Yes, that was mostly all the oak woods. All the oak woods, yeah. A complete disaster, yeah.
When was that?
That would be 18th century. Yeah, big time. And a lot of it would be, I think it was for smelting, obviously to make things like cannons, being empire and war, Napoleonic wars, of course, and all the rest of it.
Working with metal, the alchemy of metal, and using the oak woods as the source of the charcoal, there was a sort of turning point. And then to find that sort of replicated later on in time with the Industrial Revolution is quite incredible that wood from this forest possibly constructed railway lines, metal ships, girders for bridges. It's hard to imagine that somewhere so relatively insignificant at the north end of a small island may have been part of that impact on the world.
There's a story to tell about James Watt perfecting the steam engine just over there in Greenock.
Absolutely.
Glasgow, then changing the way that iron was smelted. Then the Industrial Revolution really coming from that.
Absolutely.
The Forestry Commission, when the Forestry Commission was set up, their first purchase being Glenbranta, and their Arboretum laboratory where they test all their new species just outside Dunoon.
Yeah.
And so we can link this area to these epochs of how humans have changed the balance of the world in the past few hundred years.
It's incredible. It's incredible to think of the influence that oak from a wood has had worldwide. It's mind-blowing, and the links are all there to be made. The idea that they were extracting from Lennyhoolan wood over on the west side of the island, they were taking alder and oak from there, and you would still see the trees they were working, as they've got multi-stem instead of just one trunk. They've maybe got up to 8 and 9 trunks. And they actually put in a very light railway system down to the shore. And even in the 1930s, they were using a sailing ship to transport the charcoal that they made over at the furnace mill house behind Tinnabrook, because they couldn't have anything that was going to cause any sparks, because they were transporting gunpowder to Australia for the goldfields of Australia. And you think the links are just incredible, absolutely incredible.
In the ancient days, when the woods covered all of Scotland, the dangerous places were down in the valley. The safer places were up on ridges of hills. I feel there's an atavistic love of forests and the danger, the mystery, things lurk. That's where the wolves were, where the predators were, where the bears were, and everything not nice was in the forest. So you get above the tree line, if there was a tree line, if you could.
A lot of people don't know that Scotland's got a rainforest.
It's such a magical place to be when you actually realise what you're looking at is the remnants of ancient woodland, and it's always been there. It's a perpetual right throughout history, and we need to preserve it. It's our duty to look after it.
How do we know that we're in an ancient rainforest?
It comes back to the flora. You've got plants like dog's mercury, stitchwort, bluebells. There's a whole series of plants that wouldn't like to grow out in the open. and they inform what we know. But we also have records, map records going back to the 16th, 17th century, which show that this was wooded land. So we know that even then it was a notable woodland, that they've bothered to draw it onto a map. Archaeologically, we did some test boring of marshy areas up on the hill, bogland, and we found the seeds of plants going back thousands of years in these test bores. They put down a metal tube into the bog and extract a whole section of peat, and within that was still the viable seeds from ancient trees. So we knew there'd been hazel, Scots pines, birch, all the sort of native species that you'd expect to be feeding into this area as an ancient woodland, and of course pollen from oak trees.
The conception of personhood in the Gaelic cosmology is based on the tree. So rather than today's kind of ding-dong ideology, you're left, you're right, you're gay, you're straight, you're black, you're white, it's a vertical conception. And the comedian and musician Turam and Machgade and Storm and Norman MacLean, who's quite famous as an entertainer in the kind of 70s and 80s, he talked about the Gaelic concept of history being quite vertical. The true Gael knows a huge amount about very specific things. It doesn't necessarily have a particularly Catholic with a small c conception of history, but they know a huge amount about one thing. So it's a wee bit like, the idea of a single tree. It's vertically planted, so the roots, come from all sorts of different directions. And the human life is the what do you call it, the trunk, and then that gives rise to leaves and blooms. So roots and leaves are equally important for the life of the tree. However, a proverb, and I've never actually come across it in any collection, but it just came to me, is Mary Darach Kolkiet Gelro is Unish Gudiakin Achavera Fat Unigelro is Unish Raven. So an oak can survive 500 winters without leaves, but it can't survive a single winter without roots. So that's the sort of conception. That's what trees teach us on an ongoing basis. That while roots and leaves, in principle, you can't say one's more important than the other. So it's like saying the elders are more important than young people. Well, we know that's not true, but without older people, there are no young people. It's like without the previous generation, you can't produce the next generation. So there is a certain example that trees set is in terms of respect for those of us that have lived longer or survived longer, whatever way you want to put it. So I think, in that sense, then trees teach me how to live, how to stand, and how to draw from my roots in order to nourish the leaves and the blooms.
If I remember right, there's a maximum amount. I think for the most part they never have continual snow cover at all. Maybe a maximum of a couple of days a year. You get any more than that, it starts to change habitat. We're starting to get worse winters. That becomes a massive problem. A lot of the species won't necessarily survive that. Also, on the flip side, going back to the summers, it needs for it to be a rainforest. It has to have a sort of annual rainfall in a year. And even in a month, it can't ever go that long without rain. So many of the species there, the lichens, liverworts, mosses, they need quite damp environments. But that's changing. If you were to suddenly get a particularly hot summer where it does really dry for most of it, which we're starting to see more and more of, that will be incredibly damaging to a lot of these species.
Well, very much I feel that my spirituality is informed by being in the woods because of this encompassing canopy above you that closes you in a small green space and brings you right back to the earth. And it blanks out all the modern interpretations of life, the links into technology. You can leave all that behind and just become totally conscious of the sound of the river, which is almost white noise, the sound of the birds. There's no need to be anybody else but yourself in the wood, and then lose yourself into the silence of the wood and come closer into your own inner being and forget that we are actually humans and that we've created a lot of the chaos that has altered woodlands, specifically this one. This woodland has created, over the years, vast amounts of employment, different lifestyles. Different people have lived here and used it quite differently. But intrinsically, it can connect with your own heart just by stepping back from all of that, where we've turned away from being woodland people who we were originally, and we've become confused by our own technology. We've created the Industrial Revolution, where the people left the land and moved into cities, and we became something other than who we were meant to be.
We were itinerant. We moved around all the time, doing, like the Africans still do a lot of places. They shift the cattle around and graze an area and then move on.
With like on the land.
And, they're not trying to fence it all off and become intensive and get rid of anything that's not a blade of ryegrass. That's the biggest problem, is monoculture in the world, is that, they has to get rid of everything, anything that's alien to that crop. Insects, fungi, and people, of course. They don't like, especially itinerants. They don't like that at all.
I've studied quite a lot about how people lived in this wood, and one of the main areas of activity was charcoal making. And it was that charcoal that was exported from the Western Isles of Scotland to the central belt of Scotland to fuel the Industrial Revolution, to create gunpowder, to go and blow up rocks in Australia, of all places, from this island, and the gunpowder to go gold prospecting. And you just don't think of the vast numbers of people that will be employed in that kind of lifestyle in a wood like this. There's even signs still left further round the hillside here, where they were cutting pit props for the First and Second World War, and they were using the oak from this wood for the trenches. And it's just that connection to human life from native trees and the use of the woodland in huge conflicts. To think that wood from this forest witnessed the slaughter of the Somme is just an incredible connection to make, but it did happen.
You do have quite a reduced biodiversity in the ground flora, just because a lot of it's been a good layer of turf from the top, from like a lot of that woodland's been dug up and used for doing the charcoal burning, and you don't actually have too many old trees in it. It's mainly birch and alder, sort of their early successional species for recolonising the area. Most of them, like the oldest trees, they are about 40, 50 years old tops.
It's a challenge. I mean, that's what you spend all your time doing, is fending off development of one form or another. Because any bit of land on the earth has that problem. People will not leave it alone. They have to put their ego onto it and destroy it and exploit it, Mm-hmm. So, whereas my modus operandi is the opposite of that, It's just try and preserve it just for the wildlife, nothing else,
Yeah, we're right on the sort of frayed edge of Europe here, and these are the last bits that haven't been tampered with. And that's why it's absolutely critical. We guard these with our lives, literally. We must make sure that these forests are looked after. They're the last living link going right the way back through history. They're still here. The story is not stopped, and we must make sure it doesn't stop in our lifetime.
As well, for a lot of these ancient woodlands, it's not so much about the age of the trees in them. It's been a continual woodland for that amount of time. You'll have hundreds of years of it just being an oak woodland. And with that, it's there's a lot of value that comes to it being like that for so long. You get certain species like wood anemones, small white flower, grows in the forest floor, quite rare. If I remember right, they spread out from the clump where they are. They can seed as well, but they mainly sort of spread out from their clump. And I think they can only travel about a foot. It's like they can increase by about a foot. Oh, I'm trying off the top of my head now. I think it's about 100 years or so, or something like that. It was worth double checking that. It's a very large number. So where like these woodlands, if you find clumps of like these wood anemones that are like a couple meters wide, you can see they've been there for hundreds and hundreds of years, undisturbed. They've been allowed to just slowly expand. You don't get that, and you get a lot of other species of like lichens and stuff as well, that they need that long-term stability of they've got a chance to become established and grow. The forest doesn't need people at all. It's sort of everything's got a balance. What's happened is we've came in, I want to say we've like about hundreds of years ago, even before that, we've came in, we've shaken up the balance, we've removed a couple of the key players from it that help keep the balance, things like your large predators and stuff. So if theoretically what would happen now if we just didn't go in the forest again, didn't do any management, no one went in there, what you would have is you would have your deer populations continuing to increase and graze. The oak trees in there, which is an ancient oak woodland, so it's been that way for a good couple hundred years. When they fall, they won't be replaced with any more trees as such. They will decompose, rot down into the ground, and then the areas will be overtaken with bracken. You'll also then have the species that are also unpalatable to deer, like rhododendron, and that would continue to take over. Yeah, so rhododendron, it's always one of the worst. Obviously it dominates the landscape. It self-seeds prolifically. Also as well, the leaves from the rhododendrons, and when they fall into the ground, they actually leach a sort of a specific chemical into the soil, which poisons the soil for other species, so that other species can't grow there. So even once you've like cleared the rhododendron, it can take quite a while for that area to recover before other things can start to recolonize it. It's a shame because it's a really pretty plant. Because especially right around here, you've got bits like over like Callaway, like along from Tinnabruich, where the whole hillside there is covered in it, and like when it's all in flower, it's stunning. And eventually you'd end up with a sort of a really not diverse, just large area where it's mainly bracken, rhododendron, probably dominated by a bit of grassland as well. You have species like birch and alder. They'll always sort of just thrive a little bit in pockets. Yeah, it's one of these things. We've created a system where it can't look after itself right now. It could give it maybe a couple thousand years or so, maybe. It could maybe find a new balance.
The whole story has to be there, not just one species in isolation.
Overstory, understory, all of the stories.
The whole story, yeah. The understory, I love that in the springtime where you've got hazel trees in a forest, because the hazel trees come into leaf first, and there's this beautiful green, and then they're the last to go in the autumn. So autumn, all the leaves start to come off the trees, and slowly the forest's closing down for the winter. The last ones to lose their leaves at the bottom of the forest are the hazels. We have a big challenge going on in that we have a gap in the growth of the oak trees in this wood. There's very big mature oak trees, and then there's a lot of younger oak trees that are dead, such as the ones in front of us and out that way. And there are various diseases that bring this in, like sudden oak death, and there's no regeneration because up until the community buyout, there was no control of the animals coming through this bit of woodland, domestic animals like cows and sheep, and there was a wild goat population. So that as soon as a seedling appeared on the ground, it would be eaten off and there would be no regeneration. So there's not many young trees, 3 to 4 foot high. You've got tall trees, but nothing coming on below And part of the stewardship of the land and the guardianship of the land would be to reinstate that mixed age group of trees where we can. We do need to do it, because otherwise this will eventually be a dying wood. You need to maintain the balance of age groups. I think people need quiet space in their life where they can reflect, they can step back from the world and become really human again, rather than the rush of life and sort of feeling that their lives are passing them by. I think in a forest, you're brought back to a very basic understanding of yourself and of the land, and we need to do more of that, absolutely more of that. Always changed by the woods. You're in a different space in your mind and your heart, and you're just always calmer than when you went in. If you've got a worry or an anxiety, if you take it to the woods, you will lose it. You'll get it into perspective whilst you're out there, definitely.
I just was at a bit of a bummed out point during COVID, didn't have any money, felt shit, and just got in my head that I could go and plant trees, and that would just be something that would get me away from the jobs that were in the built up places where I was struggling a lot with like anxiety and depression, I guess. And so I found myself I came back to Scotland and started to plant trees, which is a wintertime job, seasonal, and I got my chainsaw ticket as well to try and do some other forestry stuff, and I got my woodland activity leader training, which is like a kind of type of forest school basic training, and so over those 5 years I've tried to, I guess, investigate not just the planting trees but also community around how we educate kids, but I guess in the more recent years I've been trying to develop more adult focused actually education, and that's where I'm at now. It's great to plant the forest. I mean, I love it personally, but I've also noted that there's basically no point if we don't help the people to get in there and to be pals with the trees, sort of thing. That's what I'd love to be doing more of, yeah.
There's still the idea that you got some people that you can go quite radical with it, where it's like the best way to protect nature is just keeping people away from it. But that's not sustainable, and it's also not right. And it's not right to gatekeep these things. The best thing you can do to protect it going forward is try to create this healthy relationship between people and the landscape.
And if you can engage the children, the families will follow, and that builds community. I think some of the events we've run in the past and currently encourage community connection to it. People respect and engage with things that they know the names of.
Do you think names contain knowledge?
Absolutely, absolutely. There's more to a word than meets the eye. It can hold hidden depths of knowledge. So there's a place on the island called Herriot, and people didn't know what that meant, but it's a place of the alder trees. There's Lenny Hoolin, which is the field of the hollies. Beath, as we said before, the birch trees. So there's hidden things about the woodland within the language of the island. On a day-to-day basis, you're using the words without realising it.
Yeah, so my favourite tree by far and away is the Scots pine. I like birch, but I'm almost more keen on birch for the fact that the Fessac Lia hangs on it, the old man's beard. Usnea, which is really good for chest infections and things like that, because the usnea, you can see by the shape of it, it's like the way that it is when it hangs, and the kind of shape of it is very much like all the nodes in the lungs and the channels in the lungs. It's really, really similar. And in plant medicine, they call it the doctrine of signatures. So you can see what the use of a plant is by looking at it. Like you look at a nettle and it's all jaggy, and it's like, well, that's a boundary plant. That's for helping you with confidence and set healthy boundaries. And you look at the usnea, for instance, and it's like a lung, and it helps with it's antimicrobial as well. So it's not just to sort of guard against things, but it actually breaks down infections.
The ash tree, for instance, was supposed to be the tree that the Norse loved, the Igasdru. And the hawthorns were supposed to be the entrances to realms of another world. Oak trees, of course, being the Druids' favourite.
Oh, I love birch trees because they're new beginnings. They're associated in the Celtic tree calendar with the new year, the start of new cycles in your life.
Hazel. So hazelnuts as well are supposed to contain wisdom. You've got, and also as well, so hazel likes to grow near water. Particularly a lot of this goes to like your sort of Celtic folklore and a lot of Ireland and that as well. But where the hazel grows next to water, it was said that when the hazelnuts would fall into the water, that your trout would eat them. And for every hazelnut the trout ate, it gained another spot on its back. And with that also the wisdom. And that it was forbidden to eat the trout from these springs because they had this idea of like forbidden wisdom. And there's a couple different stories of people eating them and then always regretting it. Oak trees are quite commonly associated with thunder or lightning. So the two main associations are Odin, for the Norse gods, and Thor, and Zeus as well from the Greek gods, that are all sort of associated with lightning, because oak trees tend to grow taller than a lot of the other trees in the woodland. They also actually have a significantly higher water content, which makes them excellent at conducting lightning.
They look like lightning.
Yeah, which means as well that like historically people would have seen these trees being struck by lightning and they saw it as almost like they've been chosen. Those trees were chosen by those gods. What's really interesting as well is you've got, especially in Celtic mythology, mistletoe grows as a parasitic plant on oak trees, but they often viewed it as when the lightning struck these trees, that was them almost planting the mistletoe on it. Which then, I can know for the Celtic, you were only allowed to cut mistletoe with like a golden sickle, like it was a very sacred plant. It had to be done in a certain way because it was seen to be like placed there by the gods. That I always think is quite fun, when really it's just because those trees are wetter than the rest of them, so they're better at conducting lightning. You've got other ones like things like your willows and that, the bark contains aspirin. I always think it's quite, again, it's a lot of this as well, it's this idea of sort of lost knowledge, that with every generation less and less people are knowing. I think it's a real shame to lose.
In this community, we had a lot of people moved here as itinerant farm workers and so on. So they brought in Irish Gaelic, but the native speakers died out in the last century. There isn't anybody left. It's just sad.
There's not a single native Gaelic speaker left on Butte.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. That's about 100 years it's been like that.
It blew my mind, man.
Yeah. Yeah, indeed. There's nobody left in Cowell, Kintyre, or Mid Argyll either. No. I'm the only person that can, well, my kids as well, but we're the only people that can speak the dialect. Yeah.
There's just this mass destruction in Scotland with, mass planting of Sitka. They are not only they're destroying everything about it. They're destroying the environment, even though all the propaganda is, it's offsetting carbon, and of course a lot of it, the ground now is planted because of carbon credits to huge polluting companies. I
was in the tour game for 4 years, and they would be saying, so what should we be looking out for? And I was like, well, I said, it's not so much what you should be looking out for, it's what you should be noticing the absence of. I said, and that's the thing that you wouldn't know to do without a guide, without having done some serious reading. I said, there are three things that are here and shouldn't be. So I said, if there's three things that are in the Highlands and shouldn't be. And I said, one is plantation conifers, 2 is large white sheep, and 3 is English language. So I'm saying it's not that you should ever see or hear any of these. We would like to think we're a welcoming place for English people to come in with their sheep and trees occasionally. But I said, as the dominating visuals and sounds, that should not be the case. So it's the absence of things, as you say, that is the tough one, and especially so because even myself, I to an extent, I get used to the fact that there isn't natural deciduous woodland with a bit of Scots pine scattered through it, that there isn't Gaelic to be heard if I go into a cafe for a cuppa, or, there aren't black cattle on every hillside. Do you know what I mean? It is easy to just accept it as normal, but I never quite do.
They're planting up the hillside. They are clear felling it all, and then replanting it again, clear felling it all. And you're really depleting also like the area of all the nutrients and everything for like future forests or stuff.
Two biggest threats are the feudal imports for game cover, the rhododendron, which would be probably about 1880 or something, and various debates as to where it came from, either Spain or Nepal or somewhere like that. Wherever they brought it in from, unfortunately, it absolutely loves our climate, wet, acid, and spreads like wildfire. So that's number one enemy. And number two enemy is Sitka spruce, because Sitka spruce is not just confined to the millions of acres, it's not even hundreds of thousands of acres that it has polluted Scotland with, but it spreads. So, if I ever had lots of money, I would deliberately buy a property next to the forestry and then hire the top lawyers I could and take them to court, because the spread of Sitka seeds and then trees onto neighbouring land is a huge crime. I mean, not far from here, there's a lovely natural oak woodland. And not so much where there's deep canopy oak woodland, but outside that, an open tussocky field, Sitka is in the last 5 years, it's just gone mad. And if you can come back in another 5 years, it'll be a Sitka forest surrounding this little bit of oak woodland, Whereas what you should be doing is telling the forestry to cut back from that native woodland, I'd say 5 miles away from it. No Sitka. Only native. And you should be encouraged to regenerate, But that's not what happens, you see. So that's getting back to it, is you just do your own little thing, do the best you can. And I suppose by just chatting to people, some people might think, okay, it's a good idea. Yeah. And the other thing is, you don't have to own a woodland. You can be a guerrilla. You can go around. I mean, I do it all the time. You just, every time you're out for a walk, if you see a Sitka seedling that's easily pulled out, pull it out. Same with a roddy. Pull it out, wherever you are, Okay. And particularly bits where you've got a tiny microcosm. You've got, say, a beautiful holly and a rowan and some birch, and you've just got, say, 1 or 2 roddies coming in, or Sitkas. That's where the effort should be. Don't bother where there's already a wall of Sitka or roddies. That's just a waste of time, because you're not going to make any impression. Whereas a little fantastic little bit of biodiversity, just that little bit of tweaking there makes a huge difference, because it stops the rot,
We removed all the large predators that would maintain deer. Woodlands need deer. Grazing's really important. The grazing can also stop things like grasses dominating the ground. So it means you've got all these other wildflower species that then benefit the insects, which benefit the birds. You need deer in a place, but you just don't need so many deer.
At the moment, we've got a huge issue with rhododendrons coming in, which have to be managed to stop them closing the canopy, which blocks out the sunlight for the flora that's growing on the forest floor. So if you had rhododendrons in the area we're sitting in, you'd have no blueberries, and all of these little shrubs of blueberries and the mosses, that would all die out because it's very acidic soil you get under rhododendrons. It actually poisons the soil. So we lose our own native plants. So we need to have some clearance, and a terminology of clearance within the woodland, and to take out things that aren't meant to be here natively. If we can preserve it as it was originally meant to be, that's the best possible route to take it into the future.
When I was in ceremony with Anishinaabe people at the old an old township in Knapdale, and there's a well there, and I go there quite often, do ceremony, make offerings and what have you, and just keeping good relationship with nature, really, you know. And when I had the Anishinaabe there, one of the old tradition bearers that I was working with, Gaelic, we'd done ceremony, and we were washing her feet in the well because she had arthritic feet, and the water seems to be, you know, good kind of healing capacities. And once we were done, we were just sitting, we kind of broke in ceremony, and we're just chatting away and having a laugh. And then she turns round, and she just sort of suddenly says to me, yeah, so the forest man is here. And I was like, the forest man? I was like, oh, right, is there a guy from the forestry somewhere? Sorry, have I, you know? And she's like, no, he definitely doesn't work for them, you know? And I was like, all right, well, what is it? So what, like, is it a tree surgeon or somebody? It's like, you know, where are they? It's like, oh, he's standing right next to you. And the hairs just went right up the back of my neck, and I just went, I didn't see anybody. And I was like, oh, okay, so wait a minute, is he one of our people? And is he a Gael? Oh no, he's from the time before the Gaels. He's much older than that. I was like, okay. So have you been speaking to him? Oh yeah, I've been talking to him. I was like, right. He's really pleased with what you're doing here. The fact that you're feasting the ancestors, you're making your offerings, you're doing good work. He's very pleased. It's just like, great. I said, and so wait a minute, but is he speaking Gaelic then? No. I was like, well, I mean, how, if he doesn't speak Gaelic, then how, wait a minute, you don't speak Gaelic anyway. So I was like, how is he communicating with you? So she says, oh, he understands Anishinaabe Maween very well. Oh, it's absolutely surreal. But ever since, I've got, every time I've gone back there since, I've always made a little offering to the forest man, because clearly he's kicking about there. Do you know what I mean?
Well, it's the bits where they are like, really were unaffected totally by that iteration of Sitka invasion, and even of felling for the sawmill at the estate, so that somehow this little bit survived as a totally natural bit. And of course that is the most amazing place to be. You can tell it, not only just physically and everything, you know, just how marvelous it is, but in the different seasons and everything that comes in and out. But you can feel it as well. You know, you're going into a different world, you know. And I noticed, you know, you had something there about spirit. You know, there's a huge hollow ash tree, and I'm sure there's a spirit lives in it. I just think that it's like everything is interconnected, you know. The trees are communicating with each other both through the mycelium and the fungi and everything. But they are on another level. I mean, I swear, when I approach particularly that bit, the particularly very native bit of the woodland, you get warnings, you get shaking leaves. It's like, and there's no wind, and suddenly this, and so there's a warning that some alien is approaching. You get me?
We're the aliens.
We are the aliens, yeah, absolutely.
So places of magic, there is an otherworldliness about moss-covered woodlands. There's something else going on there that, just out of the corner of your eye, you'll maybe glimpse something and not be quite sure what you've seen.
Yeah, sometimes I get quite strong messages from trees, and sometimes it feels like they help me to hear myself. So sometimes it's not a direct message, but it's a sense of like clearness in my own feelings. So that sense of being like having a friend there that kind of says, it's okay, like I got you, like how do you feel and what do you need? And just having them there is like helps me to feel clearer. So and sometimes differently it feels like they speak, they have something.
If you actually become extremely familiar with a forest, even if you're blindfolded, you'd know exactly where you were in the forest with the sound of the wind being translated by trees. So the wind translating through oak has a very particular sound. If you put your ear to an oak tree in the spring or a birch tree and you hear the sap rising, it's the heartbeat of the earth. It's beautiful.
Most of us are moving quite fast, actually, and there's this sense to just be with something that isn't going to go anywhere. You can come back there as well, and even just on a sensory level, trees have moss, trees have bark. There's just like a thing to do, to smell the tree, give it a hug, sit down or lay down. And even just seeing them there, as you say, like they're bigger than me. They're bigger than us. And they have a whole thing going on too. They live with, it can be kind of messy in the forest with bits of the leaves coming off and even trees themselves having nodules and bumps and everything. And I think I find that very soothing. To step outside of things that are kind of logical or factual, or tidy even, just to be in a messy environment.
Mycelial network always fascinates the living daylights out of me. Just incredible that the mushrooms are all talking under the ground,
Mm-hmm.
And the mycelial network helps to link trees together as well.
It's essentially the mycorrhiza are, in a simplified way, almost like the roots of the fungi, or they are actually the fungi. What we see as the mushroom is just the fruit. So the mycorrhizal network's the fungus itself. And what that does is that connects all the different trees onto their roots. What you can get is a sort of symbiotic relationship from that, where the mycorrhiza, and this is all like a really simplified, because as much as I love fungi, I don't know as much about them as I'd like to. The mycorrhiza can pass on nutrients to the tree, different minerals and stuff, because it can essentially extend out from the roots, and the tree with its leaves and chlorophyll can exchange sugars with the mycorrhiza, so they work together. But what's interesting is that these mycorrhiza can send signals between the trees as well. So for some trees, they can produce their own natural insect deterrents. Should they become attacked by caterpillars, weevils, anything. So what you can get is one tree that's being attacked by these insects will send a signal down through the mycorrhizal network to all the neighbouring trees, so they can start producing this insecticide before they get attacked. Or again, if one tree is damaged or that in a storm, you can have other trees sending their nutrients to it to keep it alive. It's so fascinating. They're still trying to understand it. The importance of fungi in a forest. And again, that's something that takes time to become established. You can't just, even for like planting trees, they're looking into now inoculating trees with some of these fungi to give them a wee head start. But that takes hundreds of years for this network to become established between all the trees. And that again, it strengthens the woodland. It unifies it.
One thing you could do on sort of semi-mature, mature forestry is you could also guerrilla hut or tent. You don't need to buy the land to live somewhere. You just go on the edge where that's well away from any forestry track. You'd be safer probably about a mile from that track, or half to 3/4 of a mile at least. And you put it in the edge among the tall trees. So the time the bloody smoke gets from your fire gets out the top, it'll have dispersed. No one will see it, you know.
We had Chief Reuben George out to the land last year. Myself and myself and Lisa's eldest and me were out with him. And when he came out to the land, we were just going to go and let him make some offerings and get plugged in, because he's got McDougall roots. So, he's got a great grandfather or something that was a McDougall, from Argyll originally. So, as we were heading along the path to go and do that, we were in the middle of the woods, but it's just the forestry, plantation. But the herons just, they don't come right into the woods. I've never once in my life ever seen a heron in the woods. Sometimes they'll follow the path of a road when it goes through the woods, but they don't ever delve into the woods. It's just not their habitat. But anyway, we were standing chatting, and Reuben was telling us about, he belongs to the Sly-Wall-Tooth tribe, but they're part of the kind of broader Coast Salish kind of, I don't know what the correct terminology is, confederation, but anyway, and we were chatting away, and he's talking about how to make sweat lodges and, getting really into it. And then my daughter just sort of says to make curragreen, which is the Gaelic for heron. And I had just been telling Reuben that the heron was, I suppose in kind of, maybe slightly woo-woo circles, they talk about spirit animals, and I've always thought it was a bit silly. But if the heron does indeed appear to be a bit of a spirit animal. So I've just been saying to Reuben, that the heron, is quite regularly in and about what I'm up to. And as I'm saying this, a heron just descends into the middle of the woods and just lands on the path in front of us, about, I don't know, twice the length of your room there that you're in. And we just look in it, and it looks at us, and it looks at Reuben as if to say, all right, mate, what is quality you're here, And then it just sort of walks off into the woods. And it's like, a heron just landed in the woods and then buggered off into the undergrowth. It's just so weird. It just doesn't happen. So that was quite interesting. So, but then in Gaelic culture, when animals or birds are seen in what are their non-normal habitats, then it's a kind of harbinger of great change and things not being right. And obviously, as we know, with the neck of the environment at the moment, things are not right. So when you see things in abnormal places, then it's a bit of a harbinger, or a cotero, as we would call it.
Well, they give us air. That's one thing. Really important. They clean our air, which I just think needs like its own space for a sec. So yeah, they help us breathe. Thank you, trees. And they give home for birds plus insects. I don't know, all the different little things that make little noises. To me, each tree, even not just species, but each individual tree, they have something, and I mean, maybe that's a spiritual thing for me. There's something, because trees don't speak like us, but they're still beings.
I said, do you not think that trees must also have the capacity, if, and I'm not really saying if because it is true, but if it's true that trees take in carbon dioxide, the thing that poisons us, and spew out oxygen, they're essentially doing the opposite thing to us. We take in oxygen and spew out carbon dioxide. So in that case, are trees not, even on an emotional, spiritual level then, the perfect counterparts to human beings? And if we spend time with trees, could it not be true to say then that there's potential to have your sort of emotional state reset? Like you're spewing out all this negativity and stress from the world that we live in, and spending time with trees energetically, if you sit and cup to the roots of a tree and hold on to the roots or the trunk, or do a bit of tree hugging, Ken.
Tree planting, I connect with the trees, but I think because there's quite an industrial effort, there's not very much sitting with trees when you're a tree planter. It's a lot of movement and physical, and so I suppose that's what I'm trying to bridge. How can the industry be slower, basically, and how to speak that language when people are feeling like they need to rush, and there is this sense of like, we need to plant 10 years ago, 20, 100 years ago, we're late, we're late for planting the trees. And but then I'm called to just sit with them, and it feels like trees have taught me to be slower. Generally, I would just go and sit with a tree. Lay down is actually the best way to lay with them. Yeah, or ask for a hug. Most of the time, trees pretty open to hugs. Gave pretty great hugs. Yeah. Sometimes there just seems to be a real nook where your back is against the tree. And there's something really nice about that. I mean, they're such grounded beings, right? They're literally grounded.
We look at things in quite a human-centric way. A lot of these woodlands, these trees, they've been here long before us, and they'll be here long after us. And I know some people can sort of find like a bit of an overwhelming. They can find that a bit overwhelming of their own mortality in their own time. I think it's quite comforting. I don't know. It just makes it more special. And it adds more power and reverence to these species. How can you cut down a tree that's been here for hundreds of years? Like, how? And us in our short 80 odd years, we feel that we've got the audacity to determine that nope, that's got to go now. Yeah, it's, I don't know, I think there's a lot of spirituality from the forest, but what I think is nice is it's whatever people want to take from it. There's no set rules for it. It's whatever you feel. And I think I'm all for religions where they also celebrate that as well, and give a real respect to nature. It's not just about nature. Nature's not a tool for us to use as we see fit. It's not there for our pleasure and our enjoyment. It's there and we get to enjoy it.
Oh, I've learnt the names of trees, the songs of birds, the names of plants. I have learnt to go quiet and listen and be silent. What else have I learnt? I've learnt the archaeology of the woods here, all the creatures that have inhabited it and the people's lives that have touched it. And I've been accepted by the wood, very much. It's coming into an inner calmness and a sense that we are just here so fleetingly. We are just a very small part of existence, but part of a greater understanding of the world, almost as a living entity. We're not just crossing the surface of it. We're part and parcel of all it is, in the same way that the river flowing through it is part and parcel of this forest. And we must stop seeing ourselves in isolation as superior to nature. And it just brings an inner calm and the acceptance of life and death.
With thanks to the voices and wisdom of Agatha Broin, Alison Clarke, River Owen, Woody, Jessica Herriot, Samuel Lindsay. Footage, recording and editing by Luke Winter. Music by Jessica Kerr and Loris S. Sarid. With thanks to Creative Scotland for the funding. Follow the project at www.storywagon.co.uk.
Alison Clarke. You could bend and hug trees and climb the rocks and hug the trees. I like exploring the caves and my favourite tree is the rowan tree in my backyard. I like Harold at Forest School. It's like a bendy tree, it like stops like there's like bits in the tree so you can actually sit on it. Protect it. Because they're very old and there's not many left.